Major support for these programs is provided by Bank of America Merrill Lynch and Perfect Building Maintenance, New York Community Bank, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, M&T Bank, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chelsea Lighting. Additional support is provided by Briarwood Organization, Bruce Mosler, Capital One Bank, CASSIDY TURLEY, C.B. Richard Ellis, Cushman & Wakefield, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, DDG Partners, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Friedman LLP, Accountants and Advisors, Flushing Bank, Gemini Real Estate Advisors LLC, Genova Burns, Giantomasi and Webster, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Centurion Holdings, Corman Communities, Madison Realty Capital, Margolin, Weiner and Evans, LLP, Certified Public Accountants and Business Advisors, Massey KNAKAL Realty Services, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Sterling and Sterling, SJP Properties, Stonehenge Partners, the WITKOFF Group, Urban American, and Ackman Ziff Real Estate, Aerial Property Advisors, Eastern Consolidated, Essex Capital Partners, Goldman Properties, Moynihan Group, Muss Development, RAL Development Services, the Spandrel Group, LLC, Rosewood Realty Group, TERRA, CRG, Triangle Equities.
People around the world like to eat. They like manja. They eat all the time. So what do you bring? You profile the life of your friend who's in food. Fortunately, he doesn't eat all the time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to fit him on this suit. But today, I'm really lucky to have my dear friend, Paul Neuman, who's the chairman and CEO of Neuman's Catering. So, Mr. Neuman, let's go back to the relatives, to Sandal. Let's tell me about your mother and your father's family, where they came from originally.
Okay. Well, talking about how I got to be in food.
No, that's last. Okay?
You want to go to Sandal? Sandal.
I want to go to Sandal. No,
that's Sandal.
Now, Sandal over here, I mean, you don't have a mustache, but it looks like Sandal and all the other family, friends at the restaurant had a mustache, but Rosa, the grandma, a.k.a. the Bubba, didn't have a mustache.
Yeah, well, not for the photograph.
Not for the photograph, anyway.
Anyway, that's a picture. That's a picture of Sandal Lowenthal, who was my grandmother's father. Okay, and he was a chef in New York from, I would guess, around 1890. He passed away in 1941, and he had worked. That photograph is in all likelihood taken at the Merchants Club, where he was the chef. 1880 to 1905, 1910. I know a few things about him. He bought from out of bankruptcy a restaurant called the Auditorium on West 116th Street, and a year later he was bankrupt. So hopefully he was a better chef than businessman.
Now that was Sandal. Then there was Cornelius.
Cornelius, exactly.
And Cornelius was named after Cornelius
Vanderbilt. We had high hopes.
Right.
They had high hopes for Cornelius.
But I don't think they were of the same ethnic group.
I don't think so, no.
So tell me about that great
Cornelius was one of 6 brothers, and at one point they were all in business together in a meat market, and Cornelius did not like working with his brothers. So rather than compete with them in the meat business, he decided to open a fish market, which was around 78th Street and Lexington Avenue.
And what year is this?
This is 1906. He bought from Mo Goodman the Seabright Fish Market. The records show that in 1913 he was running a fish market called the Seabright Fish Market, which he later renamed the Rosedale Fish Market, and we're not sure exactly when or exactly where the name Rosedale comes from, but the legend has it that as a little boy, he was watching steamships, paddle wheelers, ply the Hudson River. And the records show that there was, in fact, a paddle wheeler called the Rosedale.
Now, so we have the chef on one side, we have the family on the meat side. How the chef and the family do the
Sandal was Cornelius's father-in-law. So if you put the pieces together, in 1906, it was a pretty big year for my family. Sandal buys the auditorium restaurant, and it appears to have been a hotel and a cafe as well. I still don't know exactly where it was, what it was. And in the same year, Cornelius opens or takes over the fish market from Mo Goodman. So here you have the son-in-law, the father-in-law, both trying out businesses. If you think about it, it must have been really traumatic for Cornelius to watch his father-in-law declare bankruptcy 1 year later. And Cornelius, to his credit, stuck with it, and he outlasted.
So now Cornelius, the fish store, Rosedale at that time, was on Lexington Avenue,
correct.
Right near the place which became Rosedale later on.
It was at 1130. The record showed 1913. It was at 1132 Lex. I believe he actually moved out of there for a number of years and then moved back to 1132 Lex.
Now, your father is born in like 1919, right?
Ooh, good memory, yes.
And your father's name was Bobby.
Correct, Robert.
And Robert goes to public schools.
PS6.
PS6. And he grows up, but he learns the fish business at a young age, right? Tell me about that.
Well, Dad learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. When Dad was roller skating around the neighborhood, and you have to imagine this was 1925 to 1927.
On Lexington Avenue.
On Lexington Avenue. If he happened to roller skate past the fish market, his father would say, "Bobby, hold up, skate out this order." And he would take an order with him and skate it to the delivery site, to the customer. So he learned to avoid Lexington Avenue when he was roller skating.
Now, did your dad work in the fish market also when he was a kid?
Dad grew up the way my brother and I grew up, which was sweeping up the sawdust, which no one remembers.
Shelling the shrimp.
Shelling the shrimp, walking. I mean, the hierarchy was, first you learn to sweep up the sawdust, then you learn to walk out the deliveries, then you learn to bicycle the deliveries, and when everything went right, you were asked to come in and learn to shell shrimp. This was a big step up from being an outside person to being an inside person. And you went from shrimp to oysters to cutting fish, and it was a whole apprentice system.
Now, what was interesting is, as opposed to some businesses who were really hurt by the Depression, Grandpa's business was not hurt because they had a affluent crowd in that section. I mean, it was hurt a little bit, but it didn't get completely demolished like many businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a single characteristic that I can trace from Cornelius to Robbie to hopefully myself, it's tenacity. And Cornelius was tenacious, and he would go door to door. Cornelius himself would go door to door on Park Avenue, Madison Avenue, and Fifth Avenue, asking for orders from the chefs and the cooks who were running the homes for the wealthy people. So this is at a point during the Depression when he's literally going door to door asking for orders.
So your father graduated from what high school?
It was
George Washington.
Yeah, George Washington on the FDR Drive.
And he's 18 years of age. He's working in the fish market.
Right.
And the interesting story that you told me was your dad played handball, which his son plays also. And your dad played handball, and let's talk about Pearl Harbor Day. What happened?
Dad was on the handball court in the morning, and when word came out that Pearl Harbor had been bombed, they stopped, and the person he was playing with, who was older than he was, said, "Kid, you're in." And that was December 7th, 41. By August 8th of 42, he had enlisted in the Marines and had to fake his hearing.
Right, because of the
test.
mastoids when he was younger.
He had mastoids as a child and was actually sent down to Florida to military academy. So if you can imagine an 8-year-old Jewish boy in Coral Gables, Florida, in a military uniform.
If it was in Boca, it would be okay, you know?
This was Coral Gables. And in fact, he had so many demerits that he hid the demerit book under the water tower. And years later, when I was driving around Coral Gables, I looked for this military academy in this water tower because I really wanted to find this demerit book.
So Dad joins the Marines.
Yep.
He's in the Pacific.
Yep. Yeah, so he's on Guam. He served 2 terms on Guam. At one point, the son of the ambassador to England pulls in with his PT boat, and they said, this Kennedy guy is down at the dock. Dad said, not so important. It doesn't leave his bunk. But what they're doing to feed themselves.
I heard that. This is great. Tell us about what
they are using hand grenades and TNT to go fishing. So they'll go out in a boat and drop the hand grenades or the TNT in the water, stunning the fish. The fish float up to the surface. They harvest the fish. And who do they get to cut the fish? But the Jewish fishmonger from New York. Dad is now cleaning fish on the docks in Guam and looks up and says to himself, how did I get here?
45, he comes back.
Yeah.
Comes back in 45, and what happens then?
Well, Cornelius has died in 37.
37, right, at 51 years of age.
At 51 years old. So Cornelius is gone.
Grandma's running the business.
Grandma is running the business it's really Ray's business from 37 to post-war. Robbie comes back, dives into the business. One of the things he does is one of the people in the neighborhood says, Robbie, you really should make clam chowder and devil crabs. Make some food. We would eat it. Prepared foods would be good. So he starts making 2 or 3 items post-war, 1945, and comes back to run the fish market. And he and Ray are partners at this point. When Robbie gets married in 1950,
he buys out Ray.
Ray gives Robbie her interest in the business. So now it's the Rosedale Fish and Oyster Market, dating back to 1906. But Bobby Neuman now has his chance to put his mark on the business. And
what happens? Wait, wasn't there the story that he was going to take move across the street?
Well, he runs the business at 1132 Lex from 45 till the mid-60s, when the bank that owns the property at 1132 gives him 5 years' notice. The very friendly landlord says, Bobby, we don't want fish anymore. We want you to get out. We're giving you plenty of time. Across the street at 1129 Lex is the Clark Fish Market.
Now, what's interesting that people wouldn't realize that you told me that there were so many fish markets, like there were 2 on every street over there. I mean, I don't know. I thought people ate meat, but this looks like fish, fish, fish.
Well, if you think about what business was, it was a business that required a lot of hard work, not unlike small businesses today, but it attracted a certain type of person. It was an entry business. You could do it. With hard work and a little bit of sechel, you could make it happen.
Now, what was interesting, and then we have to get to you in a minute, is that you said to me that your dad's life was the fish market all the time. 6 days a week in the fish market. Your dad was a kibitzer. He always joked with the women. He joked with everyone else. And subsequently, which you brought up about your dad, 6 days in the fish market, and the 7th day, when people was rest, your dad was going to send out the invoices. And we'll get to that because many people knew Rosedale. And when your dad passed on, I think it was Edward Albee, who said, I loved going to Rosedale. I'd have an opportunity to enjoy the fish twice. The time I ate it and then the time I paid, because your dad's bookkeeping system was a little slow with your aunt taking care of it, right?
Right.
So now let's move on to Paul. You're born also at Lenox Hill Hospital, like the rest of the relatives, your dad and some others, and you grew up in Flushing.
Right.
So let's talk about that. You go to Flushing High School.
Go to Flushing High School.
And during the day, when you're around, sweep, shell.
I grew up working in the fish market weekends and summers. But if you asked my father, I didn't work that much. But I grew up hands-on learning the business. And I didn't particularly love the business the way Dad loved the business. but I loved food. And when Dad moved the business to 1129, he didn't want to let go of the old space at 1132. And he had a couple of years left on the lease. And rather than leaving it vacant, he was approached by a French chef and opened one of the earliest gourmet shops in New York called Chez Daniel. And when I was, this is 1967, so I'm 13 years old, I go into Chez Daniel and watch them prepare foods.
Right.
And this is where...
Celery. Didn't you make the celery?
There was a celery root salad, and I still remember the big gold cans of my mustard and the celery root and this fabulous salad that I loved. No one else in my family loved it, but I loved it. So when I come back to Rosedale, and in 1977, and I don't want to fast forward here, but I graduate college, graduate with a fine art degree.
Yeah, but we have to talk about that.
Go ahead.
Okay, you grow up in Flushing. You then, where do you go to college your first year?
I go to University of Alaska.
You go to, I mean, this is a place. I mean, did you have to, what, you wanted to catch the salmon? I mean, was this the idea for going to Alaska?
It was an adventure. It was, yeah.
It was a good adventure, but I like the story about in between when you were working with the crabs.
Yeah, the summer of '72, I had just finished my freshman year of college and didn't want to leave Alaska. I had bought a pickup truck and drove down to the Kenai Peninsula and wanted to get involved in canning. I wanted to see a canning operation. So I go to a salmon cannery, and they're not canning yet. All they wanted me to do was scrub stainless steel pans.
Wrong thing. But then you get these big king crabs?
Right. So then I go, they fly me out to the Aleutians, as they did with many other people, for the summer work. We fly out on a seaplane. They place us at the cannery, and eventually I was promoted to being an unloader. And unloading the boats, if you can imagine, these boats the holds of the boats are 40 feet long, 20 feet wide, 10 feet tall, and filled with crabs. And all you would do was literally dig a hole by lifting the crabs out, standing on the crabs, lifting them out, throwing them into a huge bucket, which were then lifted by crane to the cannery and dumped into the cooker. So you would dig your hole, and at some point you're actually standing, and all the crabs, the little arms, it's like strata. It looks like slate, but it's all living crabs.
So you enjoy crabs.
I love crabs.
Then you came back, you left Alaska, you finished at Alfred.
Correct.
And then you graduate Alfred, and what happens then?
So I graduate Alfred with a fine art degree. I was interested in studio art. Come back to work for Dad. I have a sculpture studio in Brooklyn at the time. And we go to Amagansett one weekend, and we go to the Amagansett Farmers Market, and there's a mussel salad there. And it's mussels, pimentos, parsley, and a mustard dressing. I can see the salad today.
Young Paul Neuman carries on a family tradition with a mussel salad.
That's me, with a little more hair.
A little
and
more
a
hair.
little less weight.
Okay.
So I go back on Monday, literally, and I make the mussel salad. And I say, and we sell it, and it's selling. And I'm turning a 40-cent mussel into a $4 a pound salad. And Dad sort of likes this idea, that I can take something that isn't worth a lot and turn it into a lot more. So we start making mussel salad. And then I go back and start to make the celery root salad, because this is a way to almost alleviate my father's pain at having gone out of business at Chez Daniel. So we start making food, and we build up to the point where we've got 6 people working in a space for 2 in the back of the fish market. The place is jammed with food, and there's no room to walk.
So you leave the fish market,
Right.
and you and your wife at that time
That's right.
take over a store.
Correct.
And where's the first store? Where Jim
1385, yeah. No, Jim McMullen was the landlord. It was 1385 3rd Avenue, a block away from the fish market, and no one was happier to see us go than my father.
And you open up Neuman and Bogdanoff.
Correct.
And Neuman and Bogdanoff is what at that
It's
time?
a specialty food store. It's like a mini Balducci's or a mini Dean and DeLuca. So, but it's really more about prepared foods than any of those other stores. It's, if you remember word of mouth back then, it's really about the food we cook. And while my background was in fish and seafood, we were really all about chicken and beef and preparing menus, diverse menus. There was no local and sustainable back then.
So you start Neuman and Bogdanoff what year?
81.
81. Then you expand the store. You move.
In 91, we take the store next to us and really overexpand. We really make a mistake. And from 91 to 96, we try to make this double store work. And we can never get the revenues up high enough. And we can see the handwriting on the wall. We have a small catering business and a large retail business, and we're going out of business. And we're saying to ourselves, what do we do? I interviewed with a couple of my competitors. I said, let me bring you my accounts. I'll come over. It wasn't going to happen. We rolled the dice. We borrowed every penny we could borrow on our house, and the parents lent us money again.
Including your train collection?
Everything. It was all on the table.
I remember that train collection.
So we rolled the dice. We moved downtown.
So how did you find Christie Street?
Well, Christie.
I mean, I realize you like being in the Lower East Side, you know, and other markets, but
Well, actually, when I went to do some genealogical research, it turns out I have ancestors who lived on Christie Street. But the first move was to a shared kitchen in the West Village in the meat market, and that didn't work out. And one of our clients called us up one day. It was actually our liaison from ABC TV, who was our biggest and almost only client at that point, and said, you know, I was looking in the papers and I saw this kitchen on Christie Street. You might want to go look at it. I hung up the phone. I called the phone number. I said, I'd be there in an hour. I went over. I met the landlord. I said, we'd like to move in as soon as possible. It needed everything. Well, it had been a kitchen, but it needed a walk-in.
So the initial catering business, when you left the restaurant, the retail business, was what were you gearing to do? Were you doing breakfast? Because you said
it's a really good question, because what we knew was primarily residential catering and a little bit of corporate catering. But we knew the corporate catering, meaning the breakfasts and luncheons, was really, that's where we were shifting to. So while we knew residential catering.
Yeah, but those small little bagels I don't like. You know, you have to give the regular size bagel.
No, no one eats a big bagel anymore.
They scoop them out, right?
That's the scooping out. Yeah,
right.
we don't scoop. We do everything but scooping. So we moved downtown to focus on corporate catering, and we arrived on Christie Street August 1st, 1996, and we've been there ever since.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit about what happens later on about Rosedale. Your dad gets sick in 2000 and...
He's sick in 99. He's sick for a couple of years.
Right, and he passes on in 2001.
Just right, exactly.
Right after 9/11, a little
right
bit
after 9/11. October 28th.
Okay, and then the pity is, you know, you're not going back into the fish market right now.
Well, we try to run the fish market, and we try to run it, but I hate to say it, but by remote control. We have good management in there, but the costs are too high. We have a union situation that's very difficult to manage. We're the only retailer in New York with a union. We can't negotiate our way out of it. And frankly, the underlying real estate was worth more than what we could pay ourselves to remain there with a fish market.
Now, the only thing missing now that the tenant in the space was Hale and Hardy was that you should have sold the infamous clam chowder that Rosedale had.
That's right. We had two good chowders. We had the Manhattan that Dad had always made, and then the New England that I introduced in
So let's talk a little bit about the business, because the business has changed. The catering business has changed over the years, you know, especially since, you know, it's become Newman's Catering, and the name may even change on that, because, you know, you're really involved with major corporate, you know, weddings, special events. And you know, as I started the show saying manja, 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 people do eat, and people want certain type of things. And there's a different type of product for the wedding, and there's a different type of product.
Right. What's so interesting to me about the catering business is it really gives us a chance to be artistic and to be creative and to fulfill a need in the marketplace. And that need has shifted over time. Our client today asks different things of us than our client did 5 years ago. There's much more of a focus on local and sustainable, which we work to achieve at the price point the client wants to pay for the food. But it's a fascinating business because it's always changing. I go in every day. I never know when the phone rings, who it's going to be. I get calls and inquiries from corporations and families looking to do things.
Yeah, wait, are you still making some mussels? You cook once. I mean, you've never cooked for me. I mean, Paula and I haven't, you know, one time in our life with you, we had dinner with you, you know?
Yeah.
No, we've had more than that, but
the truth is, I don't cook in the business, but I love to cook. And I cook on the weekends, and I love to cook when we travel. I still am in love with food. And the beauty of what I see the catering business as personally is it's a fusion of my family history with food, my passion for food, and my interest in art, and my interest in presentation and in making things beautiful.
Now, something that you've done really, you know, a lot of people in the food and entertainment industry give back, but you've personally given back. I mean, you've done a lot of work with the Ronald McDonald and a lot of other charities. Let's talk a little bit about that.
You know, I've been very lucky, and I look around and I see people who I can help, and I'm a bit of a soft touch, and I've gotten involved with the Hope program.
I got my apples. Where's my cookies? Okay, right.
We donate one meal a month for the entire Ronald McDonald House. The first Tuesday of every month, we feed all the families and the patients who are staying at Ronald McDonald House. I work with the Pencil program. I work with the Exploring program. My mission, besides helping Ronald McDonald, is to help students and people find meaningful employment.
Let's talk about people in your life. You're married to a wonderful woman. Tell me about your wife, your son, and your daughters.
Okay. Well, my wife, Karen, who you know well, has really changed my life in the best ways. And she is a wonderful, warm psychologist, incredibly capable, incredibly intuitive, and her mission, she spends all of her time helping people.
And the daughters?
Lily is a senior at GW with a very, very strong interest in food and hospitality. And Alana, Karen's oldest daughter, has started an amazing business and is on the verge of great things and has achieved great things. She has a company called Kings of Coal, started it from scratch with $13,000 about a year and a half ago. She's doing gangbusters. And then we come to...
Let's talk about Max.
And Max, what can I say about Max? He's my heart.
Okay, and Max is with Goldman Sachs? No.
Whatever his dreams are, those are my dreams.
Now, Mom is in Arizona, right?
New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Yeah. Mom lives in New Mexico in a assisted living. She's doing well for almost 88.
Right.
You know, we say about Mom that her spirit drags her body forward. She's the most giving and loving person I've ever met, and she inspires Karen and me every day in terms of doing good in the world, and hopefully that inspiration will go down to our kids.
So, you know, if we really had to go back, and, you know, the New York stories, you know, you're going back with, you know, with Sandal to the 1850s, 1860s, you know, this is a true long-term history. Rosedale.
Well, Nathan Neuman came over on the Cimbria from Hamburg. He lived in Budapest.
He was in the...
he was a cigar maker and a tailor. He arrived here in 1875. And I actually went, when I was in Hamburg, visited the embarkation point and saw a picture of the Cimbria. So my family arrived here, at least Nathan Neuman arrived here in 1875.
So the only thing missing today was either my cookies or my fish or someone else. But, you know, people should go to Neuman's Catering because besides getting quality food, they get a quality person.
Well, thank you.
And I'm really happy you were here today. Thanks for being my guest.
Michael, it's such a pleasure. Thank you so much.